I remember going into Ghostbusters Afterlife very hesitantly. It may have been only a couple of years ago, but I still remember my tentative excitement almost getting the better of me hours before I left for the theater. Like all big blockbuster releases, good or bad, I wanted to see it. And though I'm not a die-hard fan like I am with superheroes, I love the first Ghostbusters movie. So when I walked out of Ghostbusters Afterlife pretty satisfied, I was surprised it was as good as it was. But I can't help but think it might just be because it borrows so heavily from the first. Welcome to Sandwich Reviews. I'm the Talking Sentient Sandwich, and I would call myself a casual Ghostbusters enjoyer. I remember staying home sick in 2nd or 3rd grade, bedridden from quite the tummy ache, and my mom put on Ghostbusters for me. A lot of it hasn't aged the best, and most of its jokes aren't really suitable for children, but a lot of that stuff went way over my head anyway, and I ended up enjoying every minute, practically forgetting about my tummy ache entirely. Well, not really, but it made me feel good enough to go straight into the second, which I won't get into, but I'll say it's fun. All this to say, while I might not be the biggest fan of the Ghostbusters, I have a bunch of nostalgia tied to the franchise. So when they announced Afterlife and declared it would be a return to form and a legitimate sequel to the first two, my interest was piqued. Not just that, but the film would be directed by Jason Reitman, son of Ivan Reitman, the original director, and Ivan had even been seen consulting on set. So everything in front of and behind the camera got me more excited to see this movie. But would it work as an emotional story? Who cares? I just wanted it to be fun. And you know what? It was. I can't say I loved it, but it was a joy to watch from start to finish. But was that only because I loved the first and have nostalgia for the similarities that showed up in Ghostbusters Afterlife? I'll get fully into it later on in the video, but for now, I'll say nah, because it truly felt like a love letter to the original. The movie didn't take itself too seriously, but still had reverence for what made the property famous in the first place. It's so easy to take that reverence too far and make it seem like this new movie is holier than thou with a gritty new look, and even easier to go too far onto the other side, where every line is a quippy joke and there's no meaning behind the movie at all. Fortunately, Afterlife manages to tightrope along that impossible balancing act throughout its runtime. Yet I feel like even that perspective is a little biased. My favorite aspect of Afterlife is how the third act just becomes the original with Gozer and Zool. But does the movie work for someone who doesn't know it's basically a rehash? While there is plenty of fun to be had with the characters and their interactions, all of the moments that made me sit up in my seat were references to the first. And most of the time, they were nothing more than little additions that, if removed, wouldn't change a thing. Aside from the main antagonist, who could have easily been cut and pasted to be anyone else, the similarities ended up being inconsequential. Seeing the animatronic demon dogs with their tangible puppeteering movements brought me back to that sick little kid with a tummy ache, but the only reason why they even put that much effort into making the animatronics look good was because people remembered seeing it like that. They do fill in some of the cracks with CG and make them more lively compared to their 80s counterparts, but a fully CG devil dog would have been just too much for people to handle. I think Ghostbusters Afterlife works in the same way Force Awakens does. It may be a direct rehash of storylines we've seen before, and they may be bringing back filming techniques for nostalgia, but that's only to introduce the franchise to a new generation of fans. And that's why kids were cast as the protagonist in Afterlife. A lot of people forget this, and I'm sure I'll catch a lot of flack for saying this, but Ghostbusters is a children's property. Bill Murray says some inappropriate things, and Dan Aykroyd forced the filmmakers to put in a scene of him doing some weird things with a ghost, but those are kind of excusable when you consider the time it came out. Plus, since then, 2 animated shows have come out featuring a ghost-busting team, and no one can say those aren't kids' shows. Either way, the franchise's trajectory ended up as the toy-selling children's property it is now. Think RoboCop. Definitely not made for children, but 2 sequels down the road, the astronomical toy sales forced the filmmakers to reshape or retool it to make it more kid-friendly. And I don't have a problem with that. Plenty of things I love are marketed to children and sometimes solely made for them. But that just means the writing has to be done delicately. The movie should be funny, but not too funny. It should be earnest, but not too earnest. Action-packed, but still have a lesson everyone can walk away having learned. And I think by reshaping the same storyline from the first, Ghostbusters Afterlife was a soft reboot that still managed to be fun enough to justify being made. As always, thanks for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and enjoy a delicious sandwich.